That's not nice.
Bro, I was not coming in the first place.
Are you live
You
streaming?
got closer. I told you 15 times, I'm not going
Is
to
it working?
Oh,
Oh, sick.
I hope we get railed.
This is my favorite movie.
Oh, man. Godzilla. There's no brakes on. Doesn't look like Godzilla. Better.
No, not the movie, the song.
That's what I meant to say.
Oh.
That probably
Oh,
cracked
some
him up.
scratch just walked off
I cracked him up.
my wrist. It's gone.
I think we're both cracked.
Don't need to go. Why are you kissing on a floor, man?
This kid? Don't make shit in me.
What do you mean? This guy right here? Are you alive?
And they walk around the truck talking about the weirdest. They walk around the truck talking about the weirdest. They're not even the same gym class.
Yo, dog.
No, really?
Whoa, he said, yo, dog, what did you say the thing was? Wait, are you gonna TV something on my phone?
An overwhelming amount.
Oh, yeah, I guess so. Something like that. Come on, dog.
Carter, you keep shitting your
Yes, you do.
Hunter,
Oh, you were a bit
are you breaking butt right
Oh,
I saw you watching this like a
now? Hey, look.
is this
everyone
on
in-
A? Like, free?
No, because it's
for one.
I was going back up to the
Yeah, that was, yeah, overslept, man. Hard to go in the morning like days.
That's what we were going to do.
What's that?
I know that now.
All right, everyone. So we have our motor. Now we're ready to gut it. There's a few things that we need to be aware of. So phones get put away. All right, so the biggest thing I want you to be aware of when we open this up, there's going to be lots of sharp edges that would like to cut you. That's what its life privilege. You know, it doesn't do much else in its life other than stay closed to the world. So when it has an opportunity to be opened up, it wants to take that opportunity and cut you and hurt you really badly. Okay? So let's make sure that we give it its due respect so it doesn't harm you. Okay? The first thing we're going to take off is the starting cup. Okay? And then we have the fins and then the flywheel. All of that's held in by this nut right down here, which is 19 millimeters. So I brought an impact set out.
Are we going to be using impact sets? Or no?
Yes. Okay. So 19 millimeter. Huh? We'll worry about that when we install. Okay. So impact gun. We went over this. We had you guys passed around the air one. We have the battery operated one. It has arrows for direction. Forward arrow means on. Back arrow means off. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and aim for that nut. I'm going to tip the motor. I'll have my teammate hold the motor in place so that way it doesn't start spinning, because it will want to spin this if you don't remove it. And there is moving parts. Okay, and if your fingers are there, they're going to get hurt. Remember, it's not open often, and we have just opened Pandora's box, and it wants to hurt you. Okay? So there is the flywheel nut. This is one you will take a picture of. Okay? Starting cup. What does the starting cup do?
to the starter.
It's attached to the starter. So the pull star, the little tongs inside there, you can see them spread out. They go into these little pockets here, and that's what will spin the motor connecting. So that way when it does start spinning on its own, they retract inside and doesn't cause it to spin more. Okay? Hence why it comes out when I start pulling. As soon as it goes back, they retreat. Okay? Even these are smart enough to keep their fingers out of the way. Okay, flywheel comes off. Oh, sorry, not the flywheel, but the fins. Now, those that have used engines, be aware of the little pegs. Okay, you have pins here, and some of them will even have a pin right here that will line up with the flywheel for installation. Be aware that it will only go one set. Okay, and because of students, it might not be the perfect set. This little pin right here was supposed to be in that hole right there. So that way, it locks it down and spins the flywheel. That will be in here. As you can see, those little plastic tabs sit in place. So, starting cup, cooling fins, all need to be photographed. Okay, now we need to remove the flywheel. Now there's several different methods to removing the flywheel. We can sit there and put the nut on backwards until it is level with the crankshaft and smack it with the hammer, and with that displacement there and the vibration, it will cause the flywheel to pop up. Okay. The other method is to grab some pry bars or brake spoons and put it in between here where there's a solid surface and down here where there's a solid surface and yank it and it'll pop up. I prefer an actual puller, something that's designed to remove parts. Okay? Now the tricky part is you'll need to be able to grab behind your flywheel and not risk breaking the magnet or any of the other surfaces as it pulls off. Now I know this one's already loose, so I'm going to move it so that I can grab from this side and then just off the side of the magnet over here where there is now room for the arms of the puller. I'll have to retract the puller. I don't remember what size that is. Let's just guess that. There we go. Okay, so this puller has this lock right here. So I'll go ahead and make sure that the centering pin is in the hole of the crankshaft. Okay, and now you can see I have not loosened it enough. This arm has not reached around, so I got to keep going looser. Okay, both of them are engaged, and I have plenty of space. And this is where this part right here is useful, because now I can thread that in. And this will hold those arms into place. Okay. Now I'm going to tighten, making sure that this is going to line up with that center. This is where you have your teammates help line up everything for you. Okay. Once everything's lined up, I'm going to set it this way. I'm going to grab onto it and then thread inwards. And there comes the flywheel. Okay, I'll go ahead and loosen it. And loosen the lock. And now the puller is ready to go to the next person. Okay, we have the flywheel right here. We've already removed the magneto off of the motor. That was the inductive part of the magnetic system. Here's the permanent magnet, or the stator, that spins around with the flywheel. Now, what's the purpose of the flywheel?
Keep the motor moving.
Keeps the motor moving. Just like a swing where you go forward, and you got to come back, that's the weight to help it go through the 3 other cycles that's not producing power. Okay? So that actually has to be heavy to be able to do its job. Now, there is a weight to it, so you can get lighter flywheels as long as it does the purpose of helping the motor continue its revolutions. Okay? Now, I'm ready to crack the case. So I'm going to remove what's called the back cover. Okay, once again, I'm just tipped the motor, and I got several of these little bolts that need to be taken off of. Okay, so I'm going to use a 10 millimeter socket on these, but doesn't mean that's a 10 millimeter bolt, correct? Yep. So I've just broke it loose. Now I'm going to come over to this corner, break that one loose. So I've done this one, now I'm going to come over here. Down. Okay, once they're all broken loose, I'm just going to turn them by hand to make sure that they are not holding the back cover in place at all. Now I can just use this as a nut driver and remove the bolt completely. Now, depending on your motor, will depend on how easy it is to remove this back cover. Sometimes you'll have to grab a screwdriver to pry it up a little. Okay, I like to just put my thumbs on the back side of where the oil fillers are and just kind of give it a little walk, and that will help separate the motor's the block from the back cover. And now I can sit there and go back and forth, and I've now removed the back cover. Okay, now be aware that the gasket material, this one has a replacement gasket on it, and it does not want to remove, so I'm going to leave it on place so that way I don't have to make a new one out of cereal box. So this is the back cover. It supports the crankshaft and the camshaft. The crankshaft goes here in the roller bearings. The camshaft goes in here in this forged aluminum piece. Okay. Another item needs to be photographed. Okay, let's go ahead and remove some of the parts inside. First one we're going to remove is the camshaft. Okay, now on the camshaft you'll notice there is a dot right there. Okay, and as I rotate this block, and I'm going to move the piston until it comes to what's known as top dead center, the very top of the stroke. Okay. Okay, there it is, top dead. You can see I can turn the block, but the piston is all the way up. It's not moving. Okay, that's top dead center. What I want to look at is I want to look at that mark, and if you look very closely, there is a mark on the crankshaft. That is also a dot. This is how you set your valve timing. Those dots have to be in line. If they're off by a tooth, your engine will not run properly, if at all. So I just wiggle that and it comes out. This is our camshaft. Okay, the camshaft has what's known as lobes right here and here. And then we have the exhaust brake right here that engages to help you pull start the motor. If you don't set things right, this will not engage, and then you'll have the motor pull. And if you set your valve timing wrong, it will then yank the cord out of your hand. and it's quite painful. So you want to make sure that. So that's on the exhaust side. This is the intake side. These are known as lobes. Okay, when we look at it this way, you can see the rise and then fall of the lobe. That is what opens the valve. The measurements of these can change differently to our valve timing. Okay, so a tappet sits on here, which then goes to our push rod, which then goes to our rocker, which then goes to the valve. If you have a taller one, that can make the valve open deeper. If you have a elongated, meaning a wider step, that means that valve will open longer. All of those things can relate to performance. So we will measure these, and you will find that there is some differences between each of the camshafts. Okay, so camshaft, what's its purpose? To operate the valves. Okay, and it churns half the speed of the crankshaft. Okay, as you can tell, the gear is larger, so it's going half the speed of this crank. So another part you're going to have to photograph. Then here's the tappets. This is what rides on the camshaft. Inside here is a little dish. That's where the push rod sits in. There's two of them. There's an exhaust and an intake. Make sure you don't mix those up. There's the other one. Okay. The next thing I'm going to remove is the connecting rod. The connecting rod literally does what it says. It connects the piston to the crankshaft. Okay. And what will happen is I have these two black bolts right there. Okay. And I'm going to use a 10 millimeter opened end and boxed end wrench, a combination wrench. Because a socket will not fit into that space. So I will have to use a wrench. You can put your phone away. Thanks. I want to make sure that I am loosening this bolt, okay? Because it's only going to go so much. I'm going to break that one loose. Now I'm going to come over to this one and break that loose. And then sit there, and now I'm going to remove those bolts. Now this is the harder part, as there's not a lot of room, so I'm just going to use my fingers and unthread the lower one. Okay, you'll notice that these are fine threaded bolts, unlike the rest of them, which are coarse threaded. You'll see the gaps between the thread spacing. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and remove the other one. I'm just going to make sure it's still loose, because what's known as the oil dipper, this part right here, if you remove that whole one, sometimes it will bind up on that one. It is. Okay, you can see I can't quite remove that bolt, so I'm going to move the piston and crankshaft over just a bit more, and now I can remove the bolt. Okay, now I'm going to hold the crankshaft in place. I'm going to grab the oil dipper and pull it away from the connecting rod, being careful that you don't snap this. If you snap it, then you're buying a motor. There's no replacement parts. Okay, there it goes. This is known as the oil dipper and end of the connecting rod. There's a machined into the aluminum is the bearing itself. There is no actual inserted bearing. Okay, this oil dipper comes down and grabs the oil, and it will fling it up towards the bottom of the piston wall and up under the tappets to help lube all of this parts. Okay, so this is the oil dipper and end of connecting rod. Now I can rotate the crankshaft, which then will push the piston upwards, and then it will remove it out of the block. So once again, I'm going to keep my fingers safe and out of pinch points. And I'm going to keep rotating until the crankshaft pushes the piston all the way up. So I'm back at top dead center again. And then I'm going to rotate it again. The connecting rod has now fallen loose of the crankshaft. I'm now going to push it a little more and push up on the connecting rod that's right there with my thumb, and it will push the piston out. Okay. Now I've removed the piston. There's several parts on just the piston alone. We have the connecting rod. What does it do? Connects the piston to the crankshaft. Okay. We have what's known as a wrist pin right here. That's what makes this so it can slide back and forth. We have several different things called compression rings. So we have 2 compression rings and oil ring. The oil ring consists of 3 parts. There's a thin metal, then the waffle, and another thin metal ring. Okay? The waffle one is what catches oil and coats the inside of the piston bore, this block right here, so that way it's not metal on metal contact. Okay, the compression rings are there to prevent the combustion from going into the block. Okay, so there are several things that you will be listing and photographing separately. Even though it's all together, you have the connecting rod, you have your wrist pin, you have your oil ring, and you have your compression rings, and then the piston itself. All of those will have separate photos. Okay? Okay, the block is almost gutted out. Okay, we have the governor back there. We have the crankshaft. We have the oil sending unit. This tells it will shut the motor off if there does not sense any oil in there. Let's go ahead and remove the crankshaft. All we're going to do is just pull it out. There it is. We have the governor gear. That's what drives the governor. And then we have the the camshaft gear. And if you'll notice, it is Healy cut, meaning it's cut in a slant versus, say, this one, which is a straight cut. Okay? This provides better meshing, and it's not as noisy versus this style. Okay, so the crankshaft, there's a few things on here that you need to be aware of. Okay, we have what's called journals. This is the crank journal. This is where the connecting rod journal sits right here. Okay, this end is known as your PTO. This is where your lawnmower blade or the pump or any of the equipment would be attached to this side. Okay, this bearing you'll end up measuring to see if it's gone bad. Then we have the magneto side or flywheel side, and you'll measure this one. So there's 3 journals that you'll need to know about. These are called your counterweights, so that just like the flywheel, as this comes around, the counterweight will then help suppress any vibrations in the drivetrain or the power train. Okay, so crankshaft, another photo. As you can tell, there's a lot of parts. Okay, next thing I'm going to remove is the oil sending unit down in here. That I am going to use an 8mm. Just breaking them loose and then using it as a nut driver. That's why it has this gnarled end right here so that you can grab onto it. That's the wrong bolt for that. And that's also the wrong bolt. It should have been longer. Okay, next thing I need to do is I need to remove where the wire exits the block to the kill switch. If I remember right, it's a 14mm wrench on a socket. So I'm going to unthread that. Push this in. And now I can remove the oil sensor. So what does this do?
Turns oil off. Turns engine off. There's no oil.
Yep. So another part we're going to photograph. The next thing is going to stay inside the block. I don't want you to remove it, but I want you to be aware if a part is missing. As I move the governor arm here on the top, you can see that it's moved over. And down inside here is the governor. Okay, that lowers the RPM. There is a piece missing on this one. There's normally what's known as a nipple that goes over this part. It is a plastic piece just like this. Okay, and at the base of that is a black washer. So both of those pieces are missing on this motor. Okay, so, and I'm going to leave this arm in here. I'm just going to move it back over there so it's out of the way when I go to reinstall. And then I have a complete empty block and all the parts. Once you have them all removed, go ahead and wipe them all down with a shop towel. And so that way they're nice and clean. Take your photos. And then you're going to have a lot of data entry to do in today. Okay? A lot of parts that require a lot of photos and a lot of information. Okay? All right, if you're ready to go, go ahead and head over there. If you're not working in the shop, head over to the main shop door.
This suck, huh?